Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody to another edition of Casey Lee Live Software Edition. For those who are new to the channel or new to this concept, I currently have two live feeds. One's called Casey Lee Live. That was the original one, and that is my more musical side. That's me kind of playing acoustic guitar covers. But this right here is the new stream that's been going on for a couple weeks now, called Casey Lee Live Software Edition. And what this is all about is it kind of came out of obviously all the self-isolation that's happening and everyone getting into live streaming. And I saw a live stream and I thought, hey, maybe I could do that. And I decided to focus this around kind of helping people continue their software education. I know obviously a lot of university students are still in class in the sense that they're doing online classes and things like that. But I thought this would be another great way to kind of continue learning. So again, for those who are new to this stream, it's kind of broken up into two parts. There's kind of a more kind of formal lesson or kind of like a planned section at the beginning. And then after that, if there's time, and there usually is time, there's kind of like a live Q&A on anything really. It could be about software, anything from web development to mobile development to databases to whatever, and all the way up to starting a software company and things like that. So I have a little bit of experience in that, so definitely willing to answer some questions there, or just even planning out your software career and everything like that. So again, for those of you who are new, this is more of a technical session. I do get into code, I get into coding concepts, but I try to go at a certain pace that hopefully a lot of people can follow along, or at least kind of pique their interest as they go along. And obviously some people will get more from it than others. So if you are joining us, again, if you've never been on a YouTube live stream, there is a chat that you can chat with me. You can even say hello right now and just let me know who's who's watching. Our numbers are definitely on the lower side, so the more people we get, the better. But if you get some interaction, that's always good. So definitely feel free to leave a chat. But do know that there is some privacy considerations. Obviously, when you do post a message, your name does show up, and if you don't retract your comments, when people rewatch this in the recorded version, they will see your name as well. And that brings me to my next point, which, by the way, if you guys are ever curious to watch these but you missed the live session, that's okay. These things stay recorded. Sometimes they go up right away, sometimes they go just slightly after, anything like that. You'll be able to find the old things, the old videos that we've done. So another thing I should mention is, and I say this every stream, that I am using a really great piece of software that a lot of live streamers use called OBS, Open Broadcast Software, or Open Broadcaster Software, I'm not sure. But it does from time to time crash. So if the feed cuts out for whatever reason, just wait a couple seconds. I'm able to restart it. The chat will still be live, so you can just chat on that to let me know that the stream went down, but it should be within a couple seconds that the stream gets back up and running. So there's that as well. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell icon next to the subscribe, and that way you can you'll be notified anytime I go live. If you're very curious, in this software edition of the live stream, it does take place. It's been going for about 4 weeks now. I think this is our fourth week. It goes a fourth week. And it basically happens every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So again, it seems to be a pretty good time for people to join us. Again, our numbers are still pretty low, but as we get more and more people, I think it'll be really great. I think it's really great, and I'm having a great time right now. But I just want to say that again, Thursdays at 8 p.m. is where it seems to be good right now. So we're going to keep it there for now. And the other thing is, you can see my Twitter handle right there. It's always backwards. This is probably why Snapchat and all those and Instagram do their videos backwards. My Twitter handle is right there. Feel free to tweet at me for suggestions. If you guys want me to cover certain topics that you're interested in, or you want me to go to a deeper dive on something that you've heard us talk about in the past, feel free to do that. And again, as always, you can chat with me right in the live chat as well. So definitely a lot more people filtering in today. Last week, I think we had like 1 or 2 viewers at most. This week it seems like we're getting up there. So it looks like we have about 6 to 8 people watching right now, which is great. So definitely, again, say hello if you want, and there'll definitely be time for questions. And you can ask me questions at any point throughout. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. Sometimes it gets a little bit hard managing everything that's going on right now on my computer. But I'll try to keep my eye on the chat and try to answer your questions as much as I can. So let's just see if I've forgotten to mention anything here. Let's see. Got all that stuff. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay. So, welcome again, guys, to Casey Lee Live. I really thank you guys for keeping this channel alive and giving me something to do here. I've been having a lot of fun doing this, and I'm very excited about today because it's a little bit of a challenge to me, what we're doing today. So, let me bring up the presentation here. So what we're doing today is we're going to be doing an HTML and CSS workshop. And what I couldn't really think of a better way to word what this is. But basically what this is going to be is it's going to be kind of an experiment to help people learn HTML and CSS a little bit. So it's not as formal as going into exactly what HTML is and what CSS is. It's kind of for people who've already done HTML and CSS a little bit, or who are kind of interested in it. And they're kind of interested in how web developers actually code their HTML and CSS. I know a lot of times when I'm doing my work, I'm always curious how other people are doing their work. You know, like I figured out a way to do it, and it's kind of interesting to see how other people do it. And sometimes it gives you ideas. Sometimes it gives you validation that, hey, maybe I'm doing things kind of right. Sometimes it just shows an interesting way for other people to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that if you don't do things this way, it doesn't mean that you're doing things wrong. Okay, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means it's a different way to do it, right? And the thing about programming is there are a lot of ways to do a lot of different things, and a lot of times our philosophies and ideas around how we code changes for sure. There was a big movement for a really long time with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you separate. They call it separation of concerns. And what Facebook recently, the developers at Facebook have really challenged what we called separation of concerns, was really a separation of technologies, where you'd separate your HTML, separate CSS and JavaScript, versus separating it into what it had to do with it, if it had to do with that screen or whatever. So that's just an example of how something that we've held so dear to our hearts, the separation of CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, is now being challenged by some of the top developers in the world, those being the ones at Facebook and specifically the React developers. So when you kind of see how things are being done, don't think automatically, oh, Casey did it this way, so maybe I'm doing it wrong. That's not necessarily the way to think. Now, if you don't care either way about doing it the right way or the wrong way or your way or my way or whatever, the CSS HTML workshop might be just a good way to see how to do things. Like, so sometimes we get paralyzed by like just not like we're like, oh, like I don't know how to do this if I just saw someone else do it, right? Like sometimes you just go and Google an article on Medium or something like that, and you see someone else do it, so you're like, oh, okay, so at least someone else is doing it. Maybe I'll do it that way as well, right? So that's what kind of today is meant to be. It's just kind of to show you. I've been doing web development for roughly, really seriously, probably for about 10 to 12 years, somewhere around there. I've come up with my own conventions. I try to follow other people's conventions, just to give you an idea of what, a web developer who's been working at this for a while and how they code and stuff like that, right? So that's kind of what this is all about. And the way I wanted to frame it was really as a challenge. And the challenge that I'm doing is that I want to recreate the Airbnb landing page and the Uber landing page. Now, Airbnb has always been a really big design leader. Like they have a lot of really good web design and mobile app design. They have like design kits and like a lot of design libraries. So I thought Airbnb would be a really good place to start. And Uber is obviously another big company. So just to see how their website's doing. And that's what really the challenge is today. So I've taken a little bit of a look at it, and I have some ideas in my head. But this is really going to be a little bit fly by the seat of my pants and see how it goes. And to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous because I've never coded with a bunch of people watching me. I might do things a little bit wrong or a way that I wouldn't think best, but whatever. We'll just go along with it and see how it goes. So The goal of today is for me to take a look at the Airbnb landing page and the Uber landing page and try to recreate them as much as I can using my HTML and CSS. Now, there's a couple of things I want to mention before I get started. So first, this workshop is really meant to focus on the learning of HTML and CSS. So there's a couple of things. The reason I mentioned that is there are a couple of things that I may be doing that are not exactly best practices. So you'll see, for example, I'll probably import a lot of CSS files into my HTML. And normally, if you have a lot, I mean, it's usually a good practice to separate your CSS, but importing a bunch of CSS code onto a page can be a bad practice. And there are ways around this, but I'm not going to deal with those today. So I'm not going to deal with like best deployment practices or necessarily best code organization practices either. Really just talking about the HTML and CSS is what I'm going to focus on. So if you're a seasoned web developer, you might be like, well, why is he importing like 50 CSS files? That would cause 50 requests just on loading one page. And that's true. Like that's kind of a bad practice. So if you're a seasoned web developer, you may ask those questions. And again, this is really meant to focus on the HTML and CSS itself, not the way it's deployed or packaged or anything like that. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. Just that's totally cool. Okay, you can just follow along with how I'm doing things, which is, by the way, a general philosophy I have in learning software. Don't worry about doing everything right off the bat. Don't get paralyzed about doing something wrong. It's better to kind of learn and get something and then learn the better way to do it later. So really the focus today is on the HTML and CSS. And I'll be honest, I'll probably stumble a couple times because I actually use what's called a CSS preprocessor, which basically means like I don't usually use vanilla CSS. For those who don't know what the word vanilla means in software engineering, it usually means that language without any extra libraries or any extra added features on top of it. So I don't usually code vanilla CSS. I usually use something called Sass or SCSS, and that gives me a lot of shortcuts. And I'm not going to use that today, so I'm going to be code from scratch. And again, not to mention even importing CSS into an HTML page. I haven't done that in a long time. I had to look that up earlier today, so I may stumble here and there, but maybe that's a good thing. We'll learn together. So focusing on the HTML and CSS. Okay, so a couple other things I want to talk about before I get started. So one, what this workshop is meant to do is really mimic what it's like to work with a designer. Now, I will be the first to admit that I haven't worked with a lot of designers. BiteSite has not been fortunate enough to be able to afford a designer. And we haven't been able to get enough work to get a full-time designer on. So I haven't actually worked with a ton of designers. I've worked with a couple. And so I don't actually know what it's like at the big companies when you have dedicated designers and dedicated developers, how that workflow actually happens, and if it's even a standard workflow. This is coming from my experience when a designer hands me mock-ups or they hand me high fidelity designs, like something they did in Sketch or Adobe Photoshop or Adobe. There's a web design program that Adobe makes. I can't remember what the name of it is now. Or there's another Figma, I think is the other big one, on cloud-based design application. So I'm trying to mimic how I typically work with that. So if a designer hands me, this is what I want the web page to look like, then you go and you code it. That's what today is kind of like. Okay, I'm going to look at the website as a kind of mock-up and try to recreate that myself. Okay, I got to walk you through the process. By the way, as I'm talking, if you guys have any questions, again, feel free to chat. Just because the chat's not on the live stream right now, I see the chat on my computer down here, so you can always chat if you have any questions as I go. Okay. There are a couple of things that I will grab directly from the website, which is I'll grab things like colors. So if Airbnb has this like pink color, if I need to grab that specific color, I will grab that specific color from looking at the code. But I'm going to try to avoid looking at the other CSS and the HTML that they use. There is definitely, I might glance to it, but I'm going to try to avoid that and try to code it how I would code it, basically. And then the other thing I want to mention is that aside from the colors, I'm also might grab things like the images that they use, because images are not CSS and HTML, like an image like of a person or people hanging out or whatever. Those are images that I need. So I might grab those images. And I'm going to use a library called Font Awesome, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. But if you're not, Font Awesome is a icon library that you can just, it's almost like it's like a font itself. So it's almost like characters. And then you can put icons in your website easily. So I'm not going to use the exact icons that Airbnb and Uber use. I'm going to use like placeholder icons or similar icons to that. So, okay, so if there are no questions, I'm just going to get started and see how this goes. So let's start with Airbnb. Okay. So here we go. So we have Airbnb here. So before I get started, let me just show you what my setup is code-wise. Pretty simple. Hopefully you guys can see the text here as being big enough. If not, just let me know and I'll make it bigger. But what I have here is I just have a folder on my desktop called Workshop. And in that folder, I have a folder called Airbnb. And in that folder, I have a folder called Pages. And I have a folder called Style Sheets. So this is the hierarchy of my Airbnb website. So Pages and Style Sheets. And Pages is where I'm going to keep my HTML files, and Style Sheets is where I'm going to keep my CSS files. And these are literally just blank files right now. There's nothing in them. Really nothing in them. You can see the blank text here. And what I've done is I've actually opened that file directly in Firefox here. And you can see it's completely blank. Okay. So if you don't know how to do that, like a lot of people who are just getting started in web development don't realize that they can actually open a file directly into their browser. So if you save an HTML file, you can open it up right in there. And then that's pretty much it. I just have the index HTML and the main.css. Okay. So, when it comes, again, this is really, I don't know. This is the part that's not planned. So we'll see how this goes. So just looking at this website, there's a couple things I'm noticing. So we have this website that it looks like has just a couple of major sections that are divided by kind of background color. So you can see at the top, we have this main section at the top here, which has a white background. And then we have this kind of dark area here, this black background. And then we have a white background, then a light gray background, then a white background again. And it looks like underneath that is white. It might be kind of a very light gray, but it looks white to me. So it might be off by a couple of shades or whatever. So we have a couple of sections there, and that's kind of the major division of the website. Now, this thing about talking about the major divisions of the website and stuff like that, this is kind of a precursor to how I think about all of my HTML. Usually when I think about my HTML, I think of it as grouping things together. Okay, so as much stuff as you can group together and group it in subsections and subsections and subparts and subcomponents and all these things, like just think of it as literally like parts of the website that belong together. That's usually a really good candidate for a div. Okay, so if you don't know what a div is in HTML, it's basically a division. It's a good place really to use divs, and you may have div upon div upon div upon div, and that's okay. That's okay. You can have as many divs as you want, right? To do that. So I'll give you an example. So this top section here is white, but I actually see kind of three main areas that they have here. They have this kind of main header, right, at the very top here. Let me just highlight that for you guys. So they have this kind of main header at the top here, and then they have this kind of section below to do a search, and it looks like you can search by places to stay, monthly stays, things like that. And then they kind of have this kind of featured section underneath that. So even in this one major section up top here, that's already divided into kind of three sections. So I would attack that maybe one of two ways. I would either have three sections that are just white backgrounds that are stacked on top of each other, or I would have one main section that has a white background and then three subsections underneath that. That's a way to do it too. So that's an idea of how to start to break this down in your mind. Now, if we go further down to that, you'll see in here, I have this kind of like search bar, and this search bar itself, it's kind of like another kind of groups of things, right? You have like the location, the check-in, checkout, the guests, and the search button. So that might be a div as well, kind of all put together there. So that might be another way to do that. So definitely lots of kind of things to section off there. And that's how I kind of usually think about this thing. Now, I think one of the things I should mention, you'll see how the nav bar kind of sticks to the top there. I will not be doing that in this. You can definitely do that with JavaScript and maybe even CSS. You could get away with that, but I'm not going to be doing that today. And to be honest, CSS wise, one of the trickier things I think that I'm going to deal with in this are really these kind of rounded corner image kind of description things below. That might be a little bit tricky to do. Had some thoughts about that earlier, but we'll see. We'll get to that. Okay. Now the other thing we do have here that you might want to think about as you kind of implement CSS stuff is you might want to think about some things that are kind of common. So for example, I see this new badge here, and there's a new badge here and a new badge here. So we might want to create some CSS around something called a badge because we're reusing that. And a very common thing as well is our buttons, right? So the buttons kind of look, this button kind of looks similar to this button, which kind of looks similar to this button, right? All those buttons kind of look similar. They have slightly different coloring, but they have the same kind of rounded corners, things like that. So, okay, so let's get started. So, and we also have actually this COVID-19 text above here, just, to know that that's something that we'll have to get to as well. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And it also looks like this is not actually contained. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, it's contained a little bit, but what I mean by contained is this doesn't go straight to the edge here. But it does expand with the window. So unless there's a certain point when it gets so wide that it won't, that's something we'll have to think about as well. Okay, so let's get started here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to start with some basic HTML here. Okay, so HTML like that. Now I am using Sublime. VS Code is the main editor that I use, but I thought it's easier to adjust the font size on Sublime, and it's a lot lighter on my computer. You'll notice that when I do things like this, it auto completes. So Sublime and VS Code have that ability. If you're curious why that's happening, that's just part of the text editor that I'm using. Normally you can just manually type that out. That's fine. Okay, so we have the HTML there. And let's just make sure this is all working. So we'll have the head. We'll have the body. Let's just put a header in there for now. And in the head, we're going to import some CSS. So this is the text for importing that. And where it is, it's one folder up, /style sheets /main.css. Now the reason I'm using main.css is literally because that's what I called the file. You can see it here. This is the file main.css. So we'll start with that, and let's just make sure this works. So we'll style the header. I'd like my tab size to be 2, not 4. Okay, and let's just make the color red. Just make sure this all works. Okay, so if I refresh the page, there we go. We got a red header. We're all good. Okay, so let's try attacking this a little bit. Okay, so we got a couple sections here. Okay, now I'm not a massive fan of using HTML5 tags. I don't know why, to be honest. It's just maybe I'm old school or haven't gotten used to the new tags. I think the new tags have more semantics, which is great. And they're supported by pretty much all browsers now, but you'll see me use things like divs rather than literally the word section. So, to each their own. So, okay, so I'm gonna get rid of this because we know it works. Okay, and then we come in here. Okay, so we have the body here. Okay, so what do we have? We have a bunch of sections, and they're kind of contained. So let's just start with that. Okay, so I'm gonna add a div here. And I'm going to give it a class of section. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll create a bunch of those. Okay, and what are those going to be? Okay, so we have this COVID, we have the header, we have the search, we have the featured section. So let's start with those. Okay, so this is going to be the COVID notice. Okay. And let's just put that in there just so we know. Okay, then the next section is really the header. Okay, now normally I would probably give this an ID of header because it's only going to appear on here. Sorry, not only going to be here. It only appears once on the whole page, so you can use an ID. And it's kind of separate from the rest of the page. Even though I'm not doing the sticky navigation stuff, I would probably normally do it like that. Yeah, I'd probably do it like that. So, and then in fact, what I'd probably do is surround all this with content. So a very common structure to start off with a layout is to have basically a header, content, and footer. So I have header, content, and footer, and then in the content, I'm going to have a bunch of sections in there. So I'm just going to move these guys up a bit. Oh, my shortcuts are not working. It's been a while since I've been in Sublime. Okay, there we go. All right, so in there. Yeah. So Dave Chapman just commented he just learned that while you're doing a screenshot, you can hold down spacebar to move around. Yeah, that's a really handy tool. I actually learned that from Photoshop, so you can do that in Photoshop. And I guess Apple moved it around to there, so really handy there. Okay, so we have the header, content, and footer. And the reason I'm putting the COVID notice just outside of this is that, it's normally probably not there. This is probably something that they added in kind of, I wouldn't say last minute, but, something they added in after the fact. So I kind of keep that separate. And I wouldn't even call this a section. Let's kind of be clear about our section. So we have COVID notice, the header, content here, and footer. Okay, so in the header, so this is going to be like the AirBNB logo. So let's just put some placeholder text in there for now. And then underneath that, we have our first two sections, which are going to be the search and the featured section. So in here, I'm going to put, call it the search section. Okay. And then in here, we have, say the featured section. So that'll be for like stuff we want to feature. Online experiences. Now, depending on what they use this for, I may call that something different. If you guys are here for my talk about semantics, this may not always be online experiences. Like maybe this is called the featured section, or new features or something like that. So that might not always be online experiences, but let's just call that for now. Then underneath that, we have host a hero. Help us house frontline responders around the world. Okay, so let's call that house a hero section. And then underneath that, we have stay informed, destinations for future trips. Okay, so stay informed, destination for future trips. Okay, so stay informed, destination, or let's just call it future trips for short. And then we have the footer basically after that. Okay, so that'll be the last bit there. Okay, now it is bad for SEO to have multiple H1 headers on a page. So I guess technically I'll use H2s in this case, even though this won't have an H1. But I'm just going to put H2s in here just to get things rolling, even though these won't be in the final design. So I'm just going to put those in there. And so this one we may be apart, but we'll get through this together. So we may be apart, but we'll get through this together. All right, and then we have introducing online experiences. Introducing online experiences. And then host a hero. Actually, I'm just going to grab this text directly from here. And then we have stay informed. And destinations for future trips. Oh, I missed something here. Oh, yeah, I edited. Okay. So this is host a hero. This one's stay informed. And destination for future trips. Whoops. Okay, and then I'm just going to put the word footer in the footer just to make sure that's all there. Okay, So that's pretty good. Let's see how that looks. Refresh the page. There we go. Okay, so we got the major sections of the website there. Okay, so we got the Airbnb logo for the header, the COVID thing, COVID notice, search, maybe a part, introduce online experiences, and so on. Okay, that's great. Okay, so the next piece I want to attack is just kind of this kind of expanding thing here, this kind of container. I don't think I'll get the behavior perfect on this, but at least the kind of padding from the edge that they have, I'm going to definitely get that in there. So let's just take a look at what our measurement is there. So we're looking at roughly, I don't know, let's say 80 pixels, kind of a nice round number. It looks like 80 pixels on each side. Yeah, it's about 80 pixels. Okay, so what I'm going to do is in my style sheets, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to save that. And I'm going to call it layout.css. Okay, because that's handling my layout, and probably I'll use that on multiple pages. All right. So we're going to import that. All right. And so for the layout, okay, so let me just start with resetting the body because there is some margin and padding on the body by default. So let's set our margin to 0 and our padding to 0. Okay, that should change things a little bit. Yep. Okay, now we're hugged in the corner, so we have full control over that. And now I want to introduce kind of a container. So something that's going to pull this in from the edges of both sides. Okay. So because this is not a max width container as far as I can tell, in other words, it just keeps growing as far as I can tell, at least the width of my screen. So I'm going to assume it's going to be that forever. We can actually achieve this pretty easily just by introducing padding on either side of the container. So let's create a new container. So create a container, and we're just going to introduce padding on the left and the right. So vertically nothing, and then 80 pixels on the left and the right. So let's see how that does for us. So between each of these sections, I'm going to add a container because you'll see that the section, for example, down here, the background is black. So if I were to contain this around all the sections, then the black would cut in too. So I actually have to create the container inside the section to achieve that effect. So you can actually have stuff that goes beyond the container. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight each section. Dave is on the chat. I'm going to thank him for introducing me to Command D in Sublime. It is an invaluable tool. Basic Command D in VS Code and Sublime, you can multi-select and you can edit a lot of things together at the same time. So here we go. I'm just going to come in here, and between every section here, I'm going to add a div and have a container on that. Okay. So if you missed that, basically what I was doing is I went into every div, added a container surrounding what was already in there. Okay. Now, we should be okay because there's no max width on this. Normally when you do a container and it has a max width, you would have to do some margin that centers the container. But because this just grows infinitely, we should be okay on this. So all right, so let's refresh. There we go. Okay, I forgot to put it on the footer and the header and the COVID notice. So let's just do that right now. So div container, another shortcut you can do in Sublime. All right. And then the header. And the footer. All right, so we got that in there. There we go, and we're good. So as we expand this, now I don't know what's going on the right side. So there's a trick that I usually do if I get lost in my CSS and I don't know what's going on. A lot of times what I do is I add a border to what I'm doing just to make sure I understand what's going on. So just to test this out in the container, I'm going to add a 1 red pixel border just to see everything here. Okay, there we go. All right. So actually that's not giving me a great view because the border is on the outside of the padding. So I can't see where it's ending here. But I do know that the container itself is expanding and contracting, which is good. So we'll leave it at that for now. Okay, great. All right, so we got our container, and now we're kind of set up with that. That's great. Okay. So let's start with the easiest thing here, which is the COVID notice, because the COVID notice looks like it just has a kind of a light grayish, almost blue border. And then we also have this notice here. Okay, so one thing I will say again, because I'm using regular CSS, it's hard for me to actually have the same color swatches everywhere. And color swatches are basically literally like the color palette that you're using. Normally with Sass, I would save variables for color swatches, but in this case I don't. So I'm just going to create. I'm going to find what color it is, and I'm just going to kind of comment it somewhere so we know what we're dealing with. Okay, so I just need that background color. Let's see if I can find it easily here. I have a feeling it's probably, yeah, it looks like it would be here. Maybe not. It's not. Oh, yes. All right, so we got this color here, most likely 247, 247, 247. Okay, I usually like to work in hex. So let's just see what that looks like in hex. I think that is right. So let's grab that color. And it looks like it is pure kind of grayish white, no blue tint or anything like that in there. So, okay. So what I'm going to do is, I guess in my main, maybe the best place to do this. Actually, no, we're gonna create a new page here. So this is my index view. This is the landing page. So I'm actually gonna rename this main.css, and I'm gonna rename it landing. So this would be stuff that's specific to this landing page. You know, maybe in the future it wouldn't be, but so we got that, and I'm just gonna put some comments up here. So that's how you do comments in CSS, and I'm gonna say color swatches. And that way we have a record of them if we ever need them again. Okay, so we'll call this like pale gray. So pale gray is like that, and that's what we're going to use for there. Okay, and I just got to make sure I update this to landing. Okay, so we have the COVID notice, so let's give that a background. So COVID notice. And while I'm here, I'm going to be programming the header and the content and the footer. All right, so COVID notice, let's do background, and it will be that color right there. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Okay, it is there. It's faintly there. Probably can't see it that well. Now it looks like the text is centered, and there's a bit of padding on the top and the bottom. Looks like roughly 20 pixels. So let's do 20 pixel padding on the top and the bottom, and let's center the text. All right. All right, good. Okay, so there we go. Not bad, not bad. Let's grab this text that we have in there and actually put it in there. All right. And it looks like learn more is a clickable link. So let's just make that a link for now. We'll just make it a dummy link for now. And there we go. Okay, not bad. Now I noticed their link is underlined. Let's just take a look at the rest of the page here and see if they reuse that underlined link. Because if that's the case, that might be the standard way to do links here. It looks like they have links here, but they're only underlined if you hover on them. There's some links down here that are underlined. Okay, so not really a standard thing, but let's create a class for that called underline link. Okay, so I'm going to create another style sheet and call it links. Okay, so in here we'll have our standard links, but then we'll also have underlined links. So let's call this underlined, but only applied to anchor tags. And we'll say text decoration underline, whereas standard links do not have an underline. So we'll say none on that. Okay. So where's our index here? Okay, so we're also going to import links. All right, so this is not underlined, but that's the one we do want underlined. So let's apply an actual underline to that. They call underline or underlined? Underlined. Okay, there we go. All right, we'll fix the color later, but that's looking all right. And it looks like most of their text is sans serif. So sans serif, again, it's basically anytime you see these little like hooks that come off of text, that's a serif font. And it looks like Airbnb is using a non-serif font. So I'm not going to get their exact font. But just to start off, we will create another file called Typography. Okay, and we'll say for now the whole body, the font is going to be sans serif. So the operating system is going to do its best to find its default sans serif font. And so we got to import that as well. Typography. All right, perfect. All right, that's looking not bad, not bad. Okay, so now we have this header here. So with the logo on the left, I wonder if I can just grab that logo. Might be able to grab that onto my desktop. It might be an SVG. Actually, we'll just leave that for now. Okay, take me too long there. Okay, so now we have this header here. So the logo on the left, and then a bunch of links on the right. Oh, kind of fancy links as you hover on them. And then a button on the right here. Okay, so, and it looks like these buttons or links, however you want to call them, do not look exactly the same as most of the buttons on this. So I'm going to do some custom CSS for that. And everything's horizontally laid out. Okay, so I'm going to use Flexbox in this case. Flexbox is really the savior for laying out things horizontally side by side. So I'm just going to create something here called logo, even though it's not really the logo. Okay, it's a placeholder. We'll call it logo. And what we'll do is we'll split this into two. So I'll do a logo container on the left. And then kind of a navigation links on the right. Okay. And then for navigation links, so it looks like we have a globe here. Host your home, host an experience, help, login, sign up. Okay, so let's ignore the globe for now. We'll do host your home, host an experience. Okay, so a bunch of links in there. So we'll do host your home, host an experience, help, login, and sign up. Help, login, and sign up. Sign up. All right. Whoops. Just refresh the Airbnb one. Okay. So there we go. So those are all nicely side by side. And again, Airbnb logo on the left. Okay. So now I'm going to use Flexbox to put this logo container and the nav links container kind of side by side with each other. So this is really the header section and the container inside the header section. So here I have the header, and inside the header section, look for the container, and within that container, we are going to display flex that. Now let's be explicit, but the flex direction is going to be row, which means they're going to be side by side. There we go. So Airbnb and this are side by side. Okay, so now I want to space this out to the right. So I believe that is justify content. And I believe we want space between. Could be wrong about that. Okay, so that's going to create space in between the Airbnb container and the navlinks container. So not bad. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to work on these links here. All right, so these links looks like they have kind of a pretty heavy border radius, a little bit of padding on the left and the right, a little bit of padding on the top and the bottom. And then it looks like they have a transparent background unless you hover on them. And when you hover on them, they have kind of a really pale gray. Actually, it's probably the same pale gray as this gray up here. So let's start with that. Okay. So in the header, in the container, oh, checking for updates. In the header, in the container, in the nav links, all the anchor tags in there. Okay, so first thing, my favorite thing to use is inline block for links. So what inline block is going to allow us to do is add padding and margin and border and all that stuff like that, but still keep them in line so they're going to side by side, so they don't take up the full width there. Okay, and roughly let's start off with say 5 pixels top and bottom, 10 pixels to the left and right. And the border radius again is pretty big. I'm going to say like 20 pixels. Let's say so roughly around that. And let's just add a background for now, just to see if we're getting the effect that we basically want. All right. So there we go. So it looks like not quite as tall as we want. I'm going to make that background a lot darker just so you guys can see it a bit better. Okay, as you can see, that's not quite what we want. It's definitely a lot bigger than that, the padding on that. So let's increase the top and bottom padding and maybe even the horizontal padding. See what that looks like. That's looking a bit closer to what we want. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, and it looks like even outside of that, you know, there's a bit of margin between that and what's above it. So let's add a little bit of padding to our actual container, a little bit of vertical padding. So let's say 10 pixels. Okay, so whoops, that is the container that already has the 80 pixel padding, right? So let's just do that on the nav links for now. So let's give some vertical padding to the nav links. Okay, there we go. So they're not just hugging exactly the top there. All right, so that's looking pretty good. So this will definitely be, looks like a black color. So let's do that. And in fact, again, most links in this are black. So let's apply that to all links actually. So let's go to our general links and we'll say the color is black. All right, there we go. And again, it looks like until we hover, we don't actually see anything. So let's actually get rid of that background. So this would be, what would this be? So that would be this whole thing, but when we hover on them. So let's take the background and put it on there. Otherwise there is no background. And there we go. That's pretty good. Okay, now it is light gray, so maybe we'll do that. This pale gray that we had here. So do that. And there we go. All right, so we got that. Now the sign up is a special link, so it's permanently kind of there. So let's do that one as well. So the sign up will have a special class, and again, it's hard to say unless we navigate the whole site if this is going to be a reusable thing or not. So we'll just call it sign up actually for now. Let's say sign up link. Okay, so if that's a special case, so we'll grab all that and the sign up link. And in this case, this does have a border and it looks like a slight shadow as well. So the border is probably going to be pretty light. Let's try the pale gray for now, as is the box shadow for that matter. So we will make it, actually it looks like it's centered. So no offset, but blurred for sure. So let's say 2 pixels blurred. I have a feeling this is going to be too light. And actually, let's just see what that's going to look like. That is not actually being applied right now. What did I mess up there? So nav links, a sign up link. It's definitely more specific than this. Let's see what I might have missed there. Okay, it's class. Oh, sorry, no, that's right. Nav links, anchor tag, sign up link. Okay, maybe it's just really faint. Let's just double check that. Nope, it's just not being applied right now. All right, maybe you guys are seeing something I'm missing here. So it's anchor, Oh, no, it is right there. Oh, that's not how you do a border. 1 pixel solid. There we go. Okay, we got that. All right, let's see how that looks. All right, so the border is there, but it is very faint, and it's definitely a lot darker on this. Now, I can't say for sure whether that's a border plus a box shadow or literally just a box shadow. It's hard to tell. But I'm going to do both still, and I'm going to do the same color, but maybe just a bit of a darker gray. Maybe ease. Okay, not bad. Not exactly right, but not bad. Looks like there's a bit more padding too, and the font for that matter is a little bit smaller. In fact, the font on a lot of this is actually a lot smaller than what I'm using right now, but we'll start with that. Okay, so that's pretty good. So we kind of got the header here going. That's pretty nice. Let's move on to this guy, the search. Okay, so in the search, it looks like we have a bunch of tabs. So we'll do the tabs and then we'll do the search bar underneath that. Okay, so HTML. So in here in our content. Now, okay, I'm going to back up on something here. So I have this header and then the content and then the footer. And then, so what I think is going to change from page to page usually in a lot of my projects is the content changes, but the header and say something like the notice and the footer don't change. So those, I'm actually going to put those back out to the layout. I think that makes more sense actually. So in the landing page, I'm just going to copy the header stuff and the COVID notice. I'm actually going to copy that out into the layout. I think that makes more sense out here. Okay. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Ruby on Rails, you'll see this coming from really a Rails point of view because we have our application.html.erb layout. So, okay, so this is all still working fine. All right, this is good. Okay, so let's take a look at the search bar now. So what we have is, again, we have kind of the tabs and a new badge, and then we have this kind of sectioned search, which is kind of interesting. So, all right, so let's start with the tabs. The tabs are probably pretty easy. Okay, so in here, now again, there's no real tabbed element. It's just we kind of fake it with like a tab section at the top and the tab body underneath it. So what I'm going to do here in the search is I'm going to create a tab headers and then a tab body. Okay, and in here there's going to be the search bar. So up here it looks like there's a couple of links and then a new badge, although the new badge is kind of part of that link, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so we'll create a couple of links here. Href, and this is going to be places to stay, monthly stays, experiences, and online experiences. And then there's going to be some little badge here. We'll have to style that later. And it'll be new. Okay. So there we go. We got those up there. All right. It looks like there's a decent amount of header space between those. So I'm going to pull those down a bit. And to me, that's kind of more padding in from that section. So, I mean, you could say that's margin from the tab headers, but I'm going to consider that padding down from the search section. All right, so what do we have here? So we have in the content, we have a search section, and in the search section, we're going to give some padding down the top. So the padding down the top, we will say, 20 pixels. Okay, so that pushes them down a bit. All right. Actually, also, I don't love the fact that the AirBNB, sorry, just looking at back to the header here, the AirBNB is a little bit high. So let's actually vertically center these. And again, this is where Flexbox comes to the rescue again. So in our container here, we can say align items center, and that will vertically center them, which is great. Love. I was very resistant on Flexbox, but it is pretty amazing. So, okay, here we go. So places to stay, monthly stays, experiences online, and new experiences. So definitely a bit of margin here between them. Looking at about 20 pixels. So let's create some margin between those. And what do we want to call these? Let's, I guess tab headers is already kind of already targeting them. So we could just rely on that. So in the content, The search section. In the tab headers, we have anchor tags, so we'll target those. And their margin is about 20 pixels between them. All right. There we go. And they are underlined if they're active. So that's kind of interesting. All right. So what we'll do is we will consider one of these active, which you'd control, again, with your, somehow you control with your web framework or whatever. Okay. So if it's active, it is underlined. I'd rather do that. Well, it's tough to say. You could also say, like, if it's active, put an underlined class there. Why don't we just do that and reuse our class that we already have? Okay. And it looks like it's a pretty far underline. It's not right up against the text. So we're going to have to, you know, oh, actually, underline's probably not the way to go then on that. Because the underline's so far down, unless other people know, the way I'd do that is probably with a border, actually. So let's not do that underline. Let's just say it's active. And what we're going to do is, let's just close these guys. We're not using them right now. Okay, so in our content, what we're going to do is we're going to use our inline block here as well. And we are going to do a border bottom. Okay. All right, so now all of them will have this right now. Okay, and we're going to push that down a bit by introducing some padding on the bottom. So maybe 10 pixels, maybe that's a bit much. Oh, that's pretty good. Looks pretty all right. And it looks like it might be a bit thicker. So let's do 2 pixels. Yeah, it looks all right. And we only want this on the active one. So let's copy this, get rid of that, and only if that's the active one. All right, so that's active. There we go. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And we got that new badge. Okay, so let's create a new, because badges, again, we're going to be reusing a lot. So let's create a new badges CSS. All right, so call it badge. Again, the inline block. One of my favorite things to do in CSS is text transform. A lot of people will uppercase or lowercase their HTML, and again, to me, that's more a styling thing than a content thing. So let's uppercase that, and looks like pretty small font size. So let's do maybe 80% of what it normally should be. Maybe even lower, actually, maybe like 60% of what it should be. And the color is going to be white, and the background is going to be that kind of AirBNB pink. So we're going to need to get that color at some point. So let's just do it, you know, pretty dark for now. Whoops. And then we'll color it pink in a second. Okay, so we got to import that badge still. Here we go. And just so you know how I'm doing it, so what I do is I typically import, you know, all my standard kind of components at the top, and then kind of like specific to the page after that. So, all right, that's pretty cool. Although that's not, oh yeah, it's got the background. It's just really tiny. So let's add some padding to that. Say like start with 5 and 10 pixels. All right, not bad. Not bad. A little bit wide, but it's not too bad. So let's say 7 pixels maybe. And we'll give it a border radius, maybe 3 pixels. All right, looks not bad. Looks a little bit lower in the square, but whatever. And let's get this color, this pink color. Let's see, there's an easy way to find that pink color. Yep, and it is a gradient. Okay, that's a little bit tougher to find. So let's just use this for now. 255 5692. 255 5692. All right, we'll call that our primary color. All right, so we have our primary color. All right, so grab that. And actually, let's call only the primary badges. We'll have that background color. All right. Otherwise, no background color. Actually, and that makes sense for the foreground color too. We'll change those depending on the different types of badges. All right, so that is a primary badge. All right, sweet. Looks pretty good. All right, let's do this guy. This guy is really interesting. All right, so what we have is we have 3 kind of fields to fill out. And even those fields are like made up of a field and a label. And then there's this rounded corners on this. And that's a button. Yeah, lots going on there. Okay, so this one's going to be interesting. All right, so in the tab body, we're going to start with the search bar. Okay, so we'll call it the search bar. That search bar itself is going to have a bunch of fields. Okay, and the fields themselves will have a label. Okay, so location, and then looks like a field, a field to type in. Okay, so an input field. All right, so we got location, check-in, checkout, and guests. Okay, so check in, check out, guests. All right, and add city, landmark, or address. So that would be the placeholder text, would be my guess. Add city, landmark, or address. All right, and then add dates and add guests. All right, so what do we have right now? Okay, great. So we got the fields. Oh, we need the button as well. All right, so we'll surround that. We'll call it actions for now. And we will do, we're going to do a link actually. You could style a button. You could style a submit as well, but links are a little easier to style. They do change the functionality a little bit, and I will say they do change the semantics a little bit. So just be mindful of that. All right, now, okay, let's introduce a button. All right, so we're gonna style our buttons. So we'll have something called buttons. All right, and so if we have a button, and if it happens to be a primary button. So I'm adopting kind of Twitter Bootstrap, and other frameworks use this kind of syntax. So maybe I should have done that with the badge, like badge primary rather than primary badge. All right, so we know that the main button, again, I like to use inline block for this. And then it's going to have quite a bit of padding, maybe 10 pixels and 15 pixels. The border radius is probably, that looks like 5 pixels maybe. Font size looks normal, so we'll keep that there. Oh, there's a search icon next to it. That's interesting. Okay. Border radius, and that's pretty much it. Oh, let's do border width 0. There's no border anyways to start off with, so we'll just leave it like that. All right, but the color is going to be white, and the background is going to be our primary color. Maybe I should put this in its own file. All right, so that's what a button primary looks like. Let's import that as well. And what do we got? So the search is going to be a button primary. All right, looks all right. Not perfect, but not bad either. Okay, so let's lay these out side by side. Again, we're gonna use Flexbox to do that. So this will be search bar and the tab body. Okay, so we got content search section tab body, and this would be the search bar. All right, so this is going to be flex, and again, let's be explicit about our flex direction. So it's going to be row, and now those should all be side by side. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now the width of these things seems to grow. So what I'm going to do is probably do a calculation on that. So the width of this guy is roughly 140 pixels. So if we calculate, this is 100% width. There's some border in between there too, actually. That's interesting. Actually, maybe we should have those as well. We have these little dividers in here. I might need those. Let's put those dividers in there as well. Okay, so that would be in between the fields. Okay, so we have those dividers. How does that look right now, actually? Okay, so you can't see the dividers, but let's actually code up those dividers so we know what we're seeing. Okay, so in the search bar, the dividers. So let's make them 1 pixel wide. Let's give them a background color of kind of a light gray. And let's give them a height of, say, 30 pixels. Okay, now they are there, but you can't really see them. Let me put some margin around them so you guys can see them. Okay, so there's a divider there, and there's a divider there. Okay, so they're in there, and those will come in handy in a second. So what we have here is we have a container that should be about, the action should be about 140 pixels, and then there's a pixel for the divider, and then another pixel for the divider, so that's about 142 pixels. And then so whatever's remaining, we kind of want to divide into 3. So let's see if we can do that. So if we say that in the search bar, each field is going to have a width of 100%, subtract the 142 pixels because there's 140 pixels for the search button, kind of around the search button, and then the 2 dividers. But then we want 33% of that. So can we even do division in calc? I haven't even done that before. Let's see. Is that even possible? It is. Cool. All right. So that's looking pretty good. All right. Now it looks like the fields themselves have a little bit of padding on the top, bottom, left, and right. So let's give a little bit to that. Oh, actually, this is part of the same field. So, okay. So let's give maybe, I don't know, what's look like here. 15 pixels on the top and bottom, and maybe about, what's that? 20. So do 15 pixels on the top and bottom and 20 pixels on the left and the right. All right, cool. It's looking pretty good. Now the whole search bar itself has this kind of shadow. So let's add that as well, actually. So the search bar itself, let's give a box shadow. And it has no offset, but definitely a blur. All right, that's pretty light and faint. Okay, so you can kind of see it there. And actually, it looks a little bit, we need a little bit of margin at the top. So let's just bring it down a bit. Okay, cool. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Not too bad. Now, the fields themselves look like they're underneath the labels. So let's just deal with that. So let's just make the label and the fields take up the full width. Why don't we do that? So let's grab this guy. So in the search bar, in a field, so this will apply to labels. And then we'll also apply this to inputs of type text. All right. And let's just make them take up the full width. And an easy way to do that is actually to do display block. You could also do width 100%. That also works. Okay, great. So they're taking up the full amount there. Looks like the labels are uppercased and a bit smaller font. So let's deal with that. So we'll transform these guys to uppercase. And the font size is probably maybe 90% of what they are currently now. Maybe less than that even. All right, that's looking pretty good. And then we have the placeholder text underneath that. So it looks like there's no borders on the actual text field. So if we do border none, will that take care of that? Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And the font size is pretty big actually. So let's do a font size of maybe 120% of what's normally there. Okay, we'd probably have to tweak those a bit, but that's looking not bad. Not bad at all. Okay, those vertical bars are not aligned, so let's put those into the middle. Once again, Flexbox to the rescue. So that would be in the search bar itself. So let's align the items to center. There we go, they're in the middle, and the search bar is in the middle too. Now this is in the actions place here. So let's put a comment here is that 140 pixels for actions, 1 pixel each for divider. So if we need to deal with that in the future. And then let's grab this guy. So the actions on this, the width is 140 pixels. Shouldn't mess with our, yeah, that's good there. And I'd say we'd center this guy here. So let's say, let's do a flex on this as well. Justify content center and align items center. Perfect. All right, that's pretty cool. It looks like there's a bit of a rounded corner on the search bar, so let's do that. So on the search bar, border radius, say 10 pixels. All right. And it's definitely lighter than that though. So let's just lighten that shadow a bit. Where's that shadow? All right, cool. All right, not bad. It's not perfect, but it's looking pretty good. It looks like there's quite a bit more padding actually, or yeah, padding right there. So let's just give a little bit more room to the section there. So let's say 40 pixels. All right, looking pretty good. All right, let's get to this guy here. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask as I'm going here. Now, I actually have no idea how to do gradient text. So I'm not going to do that, but it'd be interesting to look that up later, actually. Okay, so maybe apart, but we'll be together. Okay, so we'll push that down a bit. And it looks like this has a maximum width, right? I mean, if we collapse this, yeah, it starts to get smaller and smaller. Okay. So we kind of want to contain that a little bit. So there's probably a maximum width on this guy of about, say, 600 pixels. Okay, so we're getting into the next section here, which is the featured section. Okay. So this is all our search section stuff. Again, with SCSS, it's really a lot easier to organize all this stuff. So definitely check it out if you guys haven't checked it out before. So, all right, so this is the featured section. So featured section, definitely huge padding down there. So we'll pad the top a little bit. Say another 40 pixels. Okay. And then the header that we have in there. Definitely want to lighten the font on that so it's not bold. Let's just make it normal. All right. And let's, again, say that it has a maximum width of 600 pixels. And let's make the size of it quite big. So let's say 300% of what it is right now. Okay, pretty good. The line height's a little bit messed up. Like it's a little bit tight. So let's just increase the line height a little bit. Say 120% of what it is. Yeah, spread it out a bit. And for now, let's just color it that primary pink color, because again, I don't know how to do text gradients. I'd be very interested to learn that, actually. It's very nice. Gradients are making a kind of a nice comeback. All right, cool. Actually, this one looks like it's the darker pink, so maybe we can just kind of ad hoc the darker pink here. Hue, saturation, lightness. So let's bring this down. Say No, that's definitely not going to be the right color. Anyways, we'll leave it like that for now. Okay, so we got that. And then we have these cool tiles here. This will be kind of fun. Okay, so we got an image section, an image itself. We have kind of a description section underneath that, a new badge, and the call around it. Okay, so let's build those. Okay, so I'm going to call these tiles for lack of a better description. Okay, so we're going to have a group of tiles in here. And then each tile is going to have an image. Now, I may put this image in a container, but I'm going to just start by putting a placeholder for now. And what I'll do is just call that, image container. And we'll call this the write-up. And it looks like the write-up has two parts, right? So the write-up has a header and kind of a blurb underneath that. So let's call it header and then, maybe description. I sometimes use blurb, I sometimes use write-up. A lot of different terms you can use there. Okay, so that's everything we need there. So there's a couple of those. 1, 2, 3. Online experiences, monthly stays, and frontline stays. Okay, so online experiences, monthly stays, and frontline stays. So there is no way I'm getting through Airbnb and Uber tonight. It looks like it's just going to be Airbnb at minimum. All right, then we have the description here. Can I grab this text? Almost looks like this whole thing's an image. That is interesting. I was not expecting that. Anyways, unique activities we can do together. So unique activities we can do together, led by a world of hosts. Make Airbnb your home. Airbnb your home for stays of a month or longer. And find or provide accommodations. Find or provide accommodations for COVID-19 responders. All right. So we got these things here. Again, this is kind of, how I go about it. I kind of grab all the sections together and then I start styling them. Okay, so let's start styling this. Okay, so we have these tiles in here. So in the featured section, grab the featured section here. And this will be tiles. And then we'll have another one specifically for each tile. Okay, so we're going to use Flexbox once more to do the horizontal display. Oh, whoops, flex direction row, but I think that's already, yeah, something else is missing there. Featured section, tiles, what am I missing? Did I type that wrong? Oh, whoops, we have too many here. Tiles, yeah, we have the tiles, and then we have an individual tile on each one of those. There we go. Okay. So those are the three pieces. And let's start by just kind of fleshing out the different pieces to this. So we have the image container. And again, we'll just put a placeholder in there for now. How tall is that guy? So this guy is roughly 280 pixels. And the width of this tile is 420 pixels. And it looks like there is some margin between them of about, say, 15 pixels. All right, so let's make this background gray just so we can see it. And let's see what we got. Perfect. Okay, so we got kind of our three tiles there. Now, one thing I want to try is I wonder if I can border radius the tile and then set the overflow to hidden to cut off the kind of the background there. So if I do, say, a 10 pixel border radius, but say the overflow is hidden, perfect. That kind of hides the gray container behind it. Now that's a bit, oh, it's not too bad. Maybe 15 pixels. Okay, that's good. And it looks like each of these guys has a box shadow as well. So the tile itself has a box shadow. Again, looks like 0 pixel offsets, but blurred a bit. Okay, looks good. And these guys, some padding on the top and the bottom, actually all over. So what would that be? So this would be the, what did I call it? The write-up? Yeah, the write-up, which has a header and a description. Okay. So it has a header and a description. Okay, so padding, probably roughly, say, 10 pixels. Let's start with that all around. That looks pretty cool. Maybe more than that. And let's make the, so we got kind of gray text below and kind of dark text above. So the header is the same, but the font size of the description is a bit less, and the color for that matter is a bit lighter. So let's say like a darkish gray. Not light enough. Not bad. And it looks like there's some space in between those. So let's put a margin on the bottom of the header, maybe 5 pixels. It also looks like the description text is way too small. So let's just bring that up, maybe 10%. All right, there we go. That's looking pretty good. And then there's a new badge in there. So we can put that in there actually, now that we have badges. So let's call it, I don't know, secondary badge. Probably a better word for that. Or maybe plain badge, because it's going to be white and black. So that badge is going to have black text, but a white background. And we are going to put that, let's grab, where are we here? There's a badge somewhere here, right? Online XP here, it's a badge. Let's grab that text. And if you're using Rails, you could actually create a like a new badge view helper. That'd be a really nice way to do that, actually. So where are we here? Online experiences, and that's in the image container. So we'll just kind of put it in there. And again, we can put an image in here as well once we have an image, but put the new in there. And this is going to be secondary badge. And it looks like the other one has that as well. So here. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to absolute position that relative to the image container. So the way I'm going to do that, if you look at it right now, it's probably just in there, sitting there. Yep, just sitting there. I kind of want to, well, because it's upper left, I could just put the margin in it, but I also don't want to mess with the image that's going to go in there. So I'm going to absolute position that actually. Again, relative to the actual image container. So landing page, what do we got? Description. Right, it's outside of the write-up. So the image container here. Okay, so the image container, we're going to say the positioning is relative. You have to set that on the parent container if you want to do it absolute on the container below it or anything below it. So say the badge, and this guy is going to be absolute, but because we set relative above there, it's actually going to be absolute relative to this guy. So we'll say the top is 20 pixels in and the left is 20 pixels in. Boom. Okay, that's great. All right, let's see what an image looks like on this. I'm just going to grab here. I'm just going to, let's see here. Can I grab? Okay, so let's, what are we looking for here? Again, this is just temporary, so just want to see how the image would work on that. Okay, we'll grab that. And I'm actually going to pull that onto my desktop. You're not going to be able to see this because it's on my other screen, but I'll show you guys what I'm doing in a second. All right, cool. Okay, so what I did, I just added an images folder here, and there's a farms.jpg in there. So let's add that image to this because I do want to see how it's going to look in these tiles here. So in the index here, we have the image container. So what do we have here? On the index, online experiences, image container. All right, so again, this is because it's absolute, it's not going to mess with the positioning of this image. So we can just do source, images, farms.jpg. All right, so now that should at least show up. Perfect. Okay, now it is covering up everything, so let's actually play with this. Okay, so we don't need the layout. Where is the landing? Okay, so the image container. Let's grab this and actually deal with the image that's inside there. Okay. Whoops. Okay. So image container, we want to hide the overflow so it doesn't take up everything. So if we do that, okay, that's great. And I mean, it looks pretty good, but what I like to use here is pretty sweet. Actually, I didn't know about this for a long time, but on an image tag directly, you can do object fit, which is a really nice way to not need to put an image inside a div, to just use the image itself. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain the height and the width of this to the container that it's in. And then if we use cover, it's going to cover up, it's going to zoom in as much as it needs to cover up that div basically. All right, so that's pretty sweet. Why don't we grab, a couple other images just so, to kind of fill it up and make it look nice. So let's say apartment. Again, definitely don't just freely use images like this for production work. You definitely need permission to use things like this. And then we'll say medical worker. Okay, let's just take this. Actually, that has a lot of markings on it. Again, even though this is just for placeholder stuff, we can use the free filters and stuff. Okay, again, I'm going to throw those into my images folder. Oh, I didn't get the apartment image. Sorry about that, guys. I know this is not the most interesting piece, but it does bring everything together. So just nice to have something like that. Okay, apartment. And we'll say doctor. Okay, so I just threw those into my images folder. Where are we here? All right. Here we go. Image source. So doctor.jpg and apartment.jpg. Okay. Oh, spelled something wrong there. There we go. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Again, missing some icons right now, and but it's definitely getting there. I mean, this is not too bad. Looks pretty nice. And I mean, it really shows you again that like the actual coding piece can be tricky. I mean, these tiles are not exactly the easiest thing if you're just getting started, and this was definitely a little bit tricky. I going in, I just definitely did not think I'd know what I was doing there. But it's definitely possible, right? It's definitely it's not as hard as it may appear. And what differentiates a lot of websites is really the design itself. So working with a design itself, a designer who creates a great design is really like a lot of what goes into making a website look great. The coding piece is fun, don't get me wrong. It's kind of interesting to kind of do these challenges. So so what I'll probably do is I'll probably stop there, and I'll probably continue this next week. I think this is kind of pretty nice. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll stop there, and maybe in 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now I'll kind of pick up where we left off and see if there's anything else there. So Dave definitely commented there about the gradient text. Yeah, that's very interesting. Let's see how they do it. It says he's very interesting transparent text color with a gradient in the background. Oh yeah, that's really interesting. So it looks like they probably have a div back there or something. Let's see. So they have a span. Okay, so that's the text itself, and the text. So that's the text, and so this is the header, and then this is the section. Yeah, how are they doing that actually? So it looks like, again, they're making the text color transparent. Okay, so they have a div here, and so that is the background there. That's the gradient. So you create a background that has a gradient. Although I'm curious as to... Oh, okay, the background has a gradient color, but the color itself is transparent. That's interesting. Yeah, okay, so the color of the text is transparent and the background is this. I'm curious though why the background of the div itself is not showing up. How are they getting that to like mask it? That is something new to me. So definitely don't know what's going on there. I'm very curious as to, if the color is not there, why, unless this is doing something. I'm very curious as to what is blocking the rest of that background from showing up. That's an interesting thing. Okay, but that's pretty much it. Again, definitely feel free to ask me any questions right now, guys. Again, we're going to kind of wrap it up in the next 15 minutes or so. But yeah, that is typically how I would go about doing a design that has been handed to me. So if there was a design that was handed to me, I would kind of code up the major sections, and then from there it's kind of a hierarchical thing, right? Like, and then dive into each section, and you could see like the way I coded these tiles. I had a tile div first, and then I had a tiles div first around all this, and then a tile div, and then inside that divide into sections. So I'm using divs and spans quite a bit, just to kind of break up everything. Especially if you have something like this where I have an image and a badge. Those two, to be able to lay it out this way, I'd have to put that in itself in a div, and then that goes into another div, things like that. So I'm doing a lot of stuff like that where I'm just kind of segmenting and compartmentalizing a lot of the HTML and CSS into kind of like lower, like kind of like a big hierarchy, smaller, and get kind of further down. And this really lends itself, by the way, really well to when you break up, if you're using Rails and you're breaking up your views into partials, things like that. If you are, if you end up, getting into React or any kind of similar thing to React, I think Vue might be similar, where you're creating components that have their own CSS. This is kind of another nice way to do that. But yeah, so I would say the kind of interesting things here that I've never put into my own designs that are very cool. I really like this search bar here. We didn't actually do the hover this thing here, although that probably wouldn't be too hard because we already have each of these fields. Like it'd probably be just a matter of doing where are those fields. If we take this field here, it wouldn't be a matter of just doing this. We would add a border that is transparent, but that would actually add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pixels to the mix. So we'd have to do 48 pixels. And then we just change the border color here to something like, something like that. And it looks like it had a border radius too. I think that would probably do it. Oh, wait. we definitely did something wrong there. Solid transparent. Oh, this is not hovering. That's why. There we go. Yeah, so something like that. So not too bad. But this was a really interesting design, actually. Like, because when you look at this, and there are definitely a lot of designs out there like this, where it's like, it looks like a single like component or something, like one text field, one text field and a search button. Like sometimes you'll see like text fields that look like they have a search button embedded inside the text field. That's kind of like this, right? Like this almost looks like a text field with a search button inside it. And you realize, like, when you start doing more and more of this stuff, that's really a text field, and you remove the borders of that and you put a div around that and you put borders on that. And so now it looks like that outer piece is the actual text field. Definitely interesting thoughts of like this. Like I never would have come up with something like this. I think it's a really cool way to do it. I really like the minimalistic tabs like this, rather than actually having physical tabs, just underlining kind of the active tab, which is nice. Imagery is huge when it comes to design. And they use a lot of, again, this kind of white background with a drop shadow behind it, rather than using borders itself. They do a lot of that stuff. So I know I said this workshop was more about working on a design from HTML and CSS perspective, but it's also interesting to analyze this from a design perspective, designing the way it is. So okay, so what I'll do is I will keep an eye on my GitHub. I will check this code into GitHub. And then maybe not right away next week, maybe some week after, we'll kind of pick up where we left off, or maybe we'll switch to Uber actually at that point. If you look at the rest of the Airbnb website, it's just more tiles, so kind of similar to what we've been doing. A different style button up here. Nothing too crazy after that actually. So I think I've attacked a lot of the elements there. So we might not actually come back to the Airbnb one unless there's requests from you guys. It would be nice to, again, look more deeply into this gradient text, again, with that transparent color or whatever. But we will come back and we'll do Uber at some point. Uber, very different here. This is really interesting, actually. You have this background image, and then you have this, tab stuff here. This is very interesting. I always wonder how programmers actually do stuff like this with the background really integrated into the design and how it scales responsively and stuff like that. So, but yeah. So, if you guys enjoyed this, again, definitely let me know. And definitely, again, subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified when I'm doing this in the future. If you guys are watching this in the recorded form, again, you can always reach me on Twitter. And you can always, again, make suggestions there if you want as well. So, again, I'm going to stay on for maybe 5 more minutes if you guys have any questions, but I'm kind of just rambling at this point, just to kind of wrap things up. I do really want to thank, the couple of people that we had. We had more than 1 or 2 people this time, 4 to 6 at some point. The very first stream that I did, we had like 10 or 15 people or something like that. So I want to kind of get those numbers up again. So definitely reach out to people and let them know about this. I do appreciate the people who are spending, the hour or so with me on this. Again, I always have a lot of fun doing this. So really, really appreciate that. Final thoughts on HTML and CSS, working from a design. I think a lot of times you start to see me, kind of put things into different files like links and buttons and things like that. And that really just comes from my own hierarchy that's based on a lot of kind of CSS frameworks and UI kits. What I usually do is I usually separate my CSS into kind of like a base folder, which is all the kind of like generic, like buttons, links, typography, tables, like kind of standard styling. And then I have usually a folder for specific pages. And so what I do is I have a bunch of CSS specifically for pages. So if you're wondering why I decided to create new files versus not creating new files at certain times, that's kind of sometimes an architecture that you will come up with yourself. Again, in my day-to-day job, I do Ruby on Rails and I do React. And so our CSS structure really reflects that. Our CSS structure is basically base components, like base elements, React components, and then Rails views is how we structure our CSS. And then after that, really, I think my workflow, and again, this has obviously gotten better over time, is kind of thinking about all the divisions that I need, right? Like how much can you break things down until you get down to its most basic element. So start from the outside, and how far can you go till you break it down into just the text or just the link, right? Because even a link might be it might be text plus icon. So you got to think that needs to be surrounded by its own element, right? Or if you think like we were just talking about the text field, maybe the text field is not really a text field. It's a label, a text field, and a button all surrounded by something else, right? So thinking in terms of that, like how you break things down, I think makes programming these things a lot easier, where you're just like, creating the div, create the div, create the div, create the div, or span div and all that until you get down to the basic element. Now, again, it does take some practice and getting used to, but once you do that, that's a workflow that's worked really well for me, because then I have all my classes set up and everything like that. And by the way, I class a lot of things. I class a lot of, like, every one of my divs, I'll put a class on it. And even if I don't end up creating CSS for it, it gives some extra semantics to what that div is supposed to be. Is it just a div, or is it a div containing something, right? I use the word container a lot when I can't think of a word. Like, oh, this is a div that I need that's around the image, so I'm just going to call it the image container or something like that, right? So I do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then you're set up to do your CSS, and then you go do your CSS after that. One of the other tricks that I shared today that I think is really helpful is creating borders and backgrounds as placeholders, or just so you can see what your divs are doing. A lot of times I'll just create a 1 pixel border around my divs or spans just to see where they're going. Are they reacting the way I want to, right? And then I take off that border, right? And that definitely helps a lot. So definitely a lot of tips and tricks. Hopefully you guys learned something. Dave just commented, background clip text is the rule that prevents seeing the background from the gradient. That is really cool. So background clip. That's very cool, actually. So I guess it clips out what is not in the foreground, and the foreground being the text, it'll clip out all the rest. So that is awesome, actually. It's really cool to know that. I'm curious the browser support on that. It's probably pretty high. That's awesome, actually. Gonna use gradients in my text a lot more often now. So hopefully you guys learned something. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. Appreciate Dave for chatting in on that, and anybody else who's on there. Definitely don't hesitate to chat or send me a tweet or whatever for suggestions. Again, this has been going strong for 4 weeks. I plan to keep going as much as I can weekly, every day at 8 p.m. Again, I would really appreciate you guys if you spread the word. Again, I think the more interaction this has, the better. Again, I had a suggestion to bring in interviewees, and I think I will do that at some point once I just kind of get my stuff in gear. Like, it's just kind of a matter of putting in the effort. But I really appreciate you guys joining. I know we didn't get to Uber, so the thumbnail and the title is a bit misleading. But definitely had a lot of fun doing this. Hopefully you guys got some insight on that, and definitely really appreciate you guys joining. So looks like you cannot background clip an IE. Maybe you can do an edge, who knows. Anyways, thanks so much, guys. Have a good night. Stay safe, and definitely suggest more topics. Keep learning software. It is I've had kind of an up and down ride, but now for the last 10 to 12 years, maybe 10 to 12 years, maybe 10 years or so, I've really enjoyed doing software engineering. And I find a time like this, a lot of people are looking for online business and online developers and things like that. So hopefully everyone's staying safe, everyone's staying healthy. We'll check you guys hopefully next Thursday at 8 p.m. Keep an eye on my Twitter, and you'll see, and subscribe and hit the bell icon. All right, that's it. I'm out. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you later.